Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review. In this episode, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And by the way, this is a review of the Region 4 DVD from Force Video, or Force Entertainment. Hi there, welcome back to Apatros Review, your guide to the wild world of science fiction action horror, with me, your host, Mile Sipka. Now, in this episode we look at the film Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, which was directed by Dwight H. Little in the year 1988. Now, this film actually came out, premiered in the US on the 21st of October 1988, in Australia on the 9th of February 1989, and in the UK on the 3rd of November 1989. Now, the film was directed by Dwight H. Little, written by Ellen B. McElroy, from a story by Diane Lipsis, Larry Ratner, Benjamin Ruffner, and Ellen B. McElroy, and produced by Paul Freeman. It stars Donald Pleasance as Dr. Sam Loomis, Danielle Harris as Jamie Lloyd, and of course has the Michael Myers himself, George P. Wilbur, and a bunch of other actors as well. Now, this is not the definitive review I'll be doing for Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, since I actually own two different DVDs of the film. My alpha copy is the Umbrella Entertainment DVD, which came out in the early 2010s, whereas the subject of this review is of the original Region 4 DVD from Force Entertainment. I don't have the cover, so I won't be able to show you, but anyway. I have numerous copies of various films in my collection, so I'll be doing multiple reviews of certain films. But I'll be structuring my reviews so that the film portion will be almost identical in case you don't want to sit through multiple reviews of the same film if you don't wish to. Just a little something I want to share with you. Anyway, now for the film. After the critical, audience and fan dissatisfaction with the rather underrated Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, a film that only has gotten its due as a cult classic in the past 15 years, the Halloween series fell silent. The 1980s slasher market kept on going with the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchises, and a whole bunch of other slasher films, doing their business while Michael Myers was busy lying comatose in the basement of the mental hospital, and Dr. Sam Loomis was trying to cope with the burns he received in the climactic fire that occurred in Halloween 2. Then, in the late 1980s, as both the Friday the 13th and Elm Street franchises were beginning to die away, producer Mustafa Akkad decided to revive the Halloween franchise. But by this point, John Carpenter decided not to get involved, so Akkad obtained the rights and hired the newbie director Dwight H. Little and new writers to relaunch the franchise with a fresh sequel on the 10th anniversary of the original film. With Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Dwight H. Little and writer Ellen B. McElroy went back to basics. For the past 10 years since the infamous events of Halloween 1978 in Haddonfield, serial killer Michael Myers has been lying comatose in the basement of the mental hospital far from that town. One night, he is being transferred to a maximum security prison. He is a federal prison after all. But during the ambulance trip, two of the paramedics accidentally let slip that Laurie Strode, who had died in a car crash a couple of years before, had a young daughter, which is all the information Myers needs to work on. He regains consciousness, kills all the people in the ambulance, 4 of them in total, one of whom gets Myers' thumb thrust into his forehead, pretty much the thumb of death, and crashes the vehicle into a nearby lake. Getting out in a fresh jumpsuit, Myers begins heading all the way back to Haddonfield to track down and kill his young niece, Jamie Lloyd, who is with a foster family and still having nightmares about her parents' deaths. With Loomis hot in his tail, the Shade begins a one-man campaign to bring terror to Haddonfield. Of course, after picking up a copy of his mask from a local drugstore. First by causing a power outage, then wiping out the majority of the local police force, then stalking Jamie and her foster sister Rachel through the streets. Faced with a severe manpower shortage thanks to Myers, Loomis and Sheriff Ben Meeker decide to haul up in Meeker's house with Jamie and Rachel safely inside, and his last deputy keeping watch while the state police are on their way, and the local rednecks decide to patrol the streets in their pickups with shotguns at the ready. Seems to be surplus in shotguns in this film. For their trigger-happy nature gets the better of them when they accidentally gun down a friend hiding behind a bush. While not exactly on the same level as the awesome original Halloween or even the class act of the first sequel, Halloween 2, Halloween 4 still remains one of the better sequels of the franchise so far, despite somewhat mixed reception between critics and fans. Many critics found it to be disappointing, while the fan consensus is that it's the third best film in the franchise, until Halloween 2018 came along, doing the heavy lifting to put Myers into the right position to haunt a great many Halloweens to come. Little, who has become a modest action director, puts an action emphasis on Halloween 4. There are quite a few shootouts and explosions during the film's 88-minute runtime, 84 in PAL, as well as a heavier emphasis on gore. The gore effects were all done in reshoots ordered on behest of Akkad, who wanted more blood in the shoot on the film. In fact, he was apparently on the set saying, "More blood, more blood." Although the film is still not as gory or as violent as the other slashers that lived in the 1980s, but still has a respectable amount of gore, which includes that thumb of death scene with one person getting the thumb in the forehead. and one redneck getting his head twisted off. The story is basically a rerun of the plot device that Halloween 2 used as a hook for its story, with the Shape by now having undefined powers of teleportation, given how he seems to appear in the right place at the right time all the time. Coming after his young niece, played by Daniela Harris, who, despite being very young at the time, manages to deliver a performance that's superior to just about everyone else in the film, and having quite a dramatic range. Contrast that to series mainstay Dolan Pleasance, who opts to go for the over-the-top approach, making him prone to mistakes that seem scarier than Shape himself. While a bunch of his stereotypical beer-swelling rednecks decide to form a horror movie vigilante posse, grab your torch and pitchfork, armed with shotguns to patrol the streets hunt down Myers. As for Myers himself, actor George B. Wilbur does okay in the role, or for the infamous white William Shatner mask he's wearing is not of the original version, that one was lost a long time ago, instead a newly done design that looks quite bad, but not as bad as the ones worn for Halloween 5 or Halloween H2O, while Wilbur actually wore hockey pads under his jumpsuit to make him look more imposing. There are some interesting production goods seen here, from the very brief scene in the school where Myers masks briefly has blonde hair instead of usual dark hair. It must be like additional footage shot, and constantly changing scar makeup on the right side of Loomis's face. It was originally much more severe looking, but resembled having an egg yolk on his face, which was then toned down. The egg yolk version only appears in the film thanks to an editing goof that some early footage externally edited into the final print. While a sense of suspense is a few houses down the street from the perfect man of John Carpenter, Little still manages to handle the film's creepy moments with a fair degree of class. Carpenter would have loved the parts with the multiple shapes showing up at once to harass the cops in a teenager's prank, while the real Myers watches on, or the scene where the rednecks shoot a pile of bushes, thinking they've got him, only to find they accidentally shot one of their friends. The film's opening credits, with the abandoned buildings of Halloween iconography lying around completely silently, while Alan Horowith's ethereally sounding subtle 1980s synthesizer score hangs about just under the surface of the soundscape, is one of the best opening credits sequences of the whole Halloween franchise, equal to the first two, and it still holds up well today, only topped by the very brave final scene where Jamie Lloyd stabs her foster mother in the bath with a pair of scissors, distressed in fear of her uncle somehow corrupting her actions. This ending, signaling the transfer of evil to Myers to his niece, was very good, indeed almost perfect in the eyes of fans who wait to round up the series mythology. Unfortunately, Halloween 5 decided to cowardly retcon down in a brainless fashion. While not exactly a solid film, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, does its job in a modestly entertaining manner that gives it a C+, 5 out of 10 in my book, and while a late entry in the 1980s slasher genre, still manages to be one of the best of that decade. Now for the gore. The thumb of death impales the guy in his forehead, while Redneck gets his head twisted around badly, Kathleen Kimmott gets impaled by Myers through a door of a police shotgun. Seriously, what is it with all the shotguns? If this was made 20 years later, the cops will all have M4 assault rifles and Myers will be seriously screwed. While the dad takes Myers down with Spaz 12, the 12-gauge autoloader that the Terminator used in 1984. Despite the added gore, this still isn't a substantially gory film. As for nudity, Kathleen Kimmott has side pics of her boobs at one point. Now for the DVD. As I've previously mentioned, this review is for the Region 4 DVD release from Force Entertainment, which put the film out in a Halloween-themed box set with the first 5 films in the franchise. While the first 3 discs were pretty common in some places, the ones for Halloween 4 and 5 weren't too easy to find outside of the box set. Now, while it has had a very nasty reputation with the DVD collectors during the early days, Force Entertainment, previously Force Video, has had chances to improve. For Halloween 4, Force Entertainment puts up for their stands a very nice looking print of the film onto their single-layer DVD, with the exception of the print not being 16:9 white flag. Instead it's letterbox, but in the original 1:85 ratio. There is no issue I had with the print aside from the grain that's present constantly throughout. Although this is not distracting enough unless you watch this on a very big TV. The soundtrack is also surprisingly good. Solitary English 5.1 that sounded a good deal more substantial than stereo mono soundtracks of the earlier sequels, and more meaty in sound effects. I had heard that in some DVD releases around the world, some sound cues were removed from the original soundscape, namely thunderclaps in the opening scene and the door buzzer removed right after a line of dialogue. After checking this DVD, the Force Entertainment DVD, I'm pleased to report that the soundtrack here leaves those sound cues intact. There are no subtitles here, so the hard of hearing are going to have to lip read their way through this one. Not always reliable due to the nature of film dubbing and ADR work in most films. While the menu design is not as creepy as the one used for Force releases of the first 3 Halloween films, but does look okay enough. The supplement is where this gets a little strange. Aside from the film's theatrical trailer, the only supplement is a 20-minute short film called Cut, where a horror director named Alfred Carpenter introduces a hardcore female horror fan into his filmmaking world, who uses her as a target for real-life killing, only for her to turn the tables and learn to listen, becoming a hotshot horror director herself. The film has only ever been released on DVD on the Region 1 release of the insane low-budget film Machine Head. which was a film about a guy who uses lawnmower engines to revive the dead. And I actually have a copy of that, the Australian release of that for Flashback. I'll review it one day. So if you're into that sort of thing, this shot's inclusion on the Halloween 4 DVD is perfect for inclusion purposes. But otherwise, including this on a Halloween DVD is more than just a little strange. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, has since been reissued on the Region 4 DVD by Umbrella Entertainment, along with Halloween 5 about a half decade later, and it's a much better disc, although I heard it's an NTSC, which I normally don't have a problem with. It was also released on Blu-ray at the same time. It will be a while before I get around to reviewing that disc, so I hope this review will fill in the gap for a while. And by the way, for this year, I will review the Force Entertainment release of Halloween 5, and the American Echo Bridge releases of Halloween 6, H2, and Resurrection. It's like on a single set. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. And by the way, so basically Halloween 4 gets a C+, 5 out of 10. It's passable. Probably right now of Halloween 2018, it will be like the 4th greatest Halloween film. And so, I mean, if you have the Force Entertainment DVD, it's interesting. It's not a bad backup disc if you got the Umbrella one. Okay, it's actually Region 4, so if any Americans or British that have multi-regional DVD players, this one will be fine. I don't do requests, but if you want to know if I have a particular film in my collection, just hit me up in the comments section. Also, if you have any questions about DVDs, I'll be happy to answer them. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and that's it for this review. Stay safe.